the investors panel, Investors Insight. And we have a new member here on stage. You've all seen Eddie, Tone, and Steve. All three had talks, but you haven't seen Mark yet, so I think he should introduce himself. And he has an interesting personality. He's both an investor, but also an artist. So please say a few words about yourself, Mark.
Yeah, hi everybody. Just very briefly, I'm Mark from Zurich, Switzerland. I'm originally a tech entrepreneur, co-founded and exited 2 internet companies in the early days. So everything happening in this space looks and feels quite similar. I guess you see the same. In 2010, I started to invest mainly in fintech. Got in contact with the white paper of Satoshi in 2012. Was also very fascinated. I especially liked your slide, Tone, with Cyprus. I think that was also for me a tipping point. And since then, I'm involved in quite a few companies. Among other, I'm in the board of Falcon Private Bank, a 52-year-old private bank, where we also help our investors and clients to go into the space. I'm in the board of Crypto Finance Group and also involved in some other companies. And besides that, I'm also doing some pixel art.
Okay, great. I like panels when they're controversial, when people fight, right? Not that everybody agrees, that's kind of boring. So I think one of the issues that's always controversial is the thing, Bitcoin versus the rest. So let's begin with Bitcoin and the forks. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Plutonium, Bitcoin whatsoever, Satoshi's vision. Eddie, what's your take on those? Are you more the maximalist, or you love all these? Are you like Roger Ver and for Bitcoin Cash? What's your take on that?
So I mean, I think on one side I agree with some of the Bitcoin maximalist terms in the or thoughts in the fact that why replicate Bitcoin if it works well and if it's secured by the largest mining and computational power in the world, right? So that's a very clear argument. Now, of course, I remember reading the Ethereum white paper very early and discussing about Ethereum. And I'm an investor and a supporter of, for example, RSK, which has its own kind of new token and new system and sidechain. So my feeling is there are some ways to complement Bitcoin. There are some ways to bring what originally Bitcoin didn't bring, which is, of course, as we know, the Turing complete language, the smart contract. So, but yes, I mean, in terms of these, for me, are improvements basically. But I don't see the need necessarily for any Bitcoin clone that wouldn't bring just a different branding or marketing, let's say, ideogram to the business, because it doesn't bring much. I mean, in this documentary that we just saw yesterday or the day before in London, we saw the guy from Dogecoin saying, well, I just put a dog in there and I copied the Bitcoin, open source code. So yeah, it's fun, but it doesn't really bring anything to the table.
I'll make it really quick. They're fake Bitcoin, and they're holding back Bitcoin adoption because people are confused. They go to Bitcoin.com, and they're like, you go to Gold.com, and they're selling you tungsten instead of gold because it weighs the same, right? I mean, they'll go away sooner or later. I mean, they're completely irrelevant. They're totally centralized, and they just had a 51% attack, returned transactions back, redid transactions. Nobody cares. Nobody even paid attention. And the sooner they go away, the sooner Bitcoin, will be adopted. I mean, they are holding us back.
Steve, you disagree, right?
I think it's healthy. I think forks are healthy because it gets the people that are dissenters onto their own project. You go do your own thing, you take the open source code, God bless you, have fun, go do what you want. And I think it's good to have them working their own cycles and their own development path. And I think it's also good that we have all this innovation. What's really significant to me is all of the speculation around these different coins drives the innovation. So it's driving entrepreneurs to innovate, to find new solutions. There's things Ethereum does that Bitcoin doesn't do well. There's things like Litecoin's a better transactional currency than Bitcoin. And so therefore, for me as a payment processor, we took Litecoin on very, very early because the processing time was about a quarter of the time that it takes to process Bitcoin.
Yeah, but like I said in my presentation, Venezuelan Bolivar is a better transactional currency than Litecoin. Like, the moment you get it, you will immediately spend it.
Sure, we take them all. Why not?
Okay. Mark, what's your opinion on these?
Yeah, I would say based on facts, 90% of my crypto exposure is in Bitcoin. So you can call it somehow Bitcoin maximalist, and the rest is spread in You call it either other interesting projects or shitcoins or equity-like of investments and mining. But ultimately, I think if you really go into the core and the upside, I think, Bitcoin is a unique solution. Also, when you look the people behind, the passion behind, the real impact on society, I think from this perspective, I'm full into Bitcoin. But as an investor, you have to diversify. And that's the main reason why I have a certain portion involved in other projects.
And you actually could build all of these altcoins and ICOs and CryptoKitties on top of Bitcoin. The Liquid sidechain has already launched. It doesn't have a marketing or an advertising budget, but it's there for you to build CryptoKitties on it. I think it's one of the useless cases for a blockchain. 99% of everything on a blockchain should not be on a blockchain. Just do it in an Excel spreadsheet as a Google Doc. It'll be more efficient.
Okay. Yeah, but you got a $50 billion market with these virtual goods being traded for gaming. I mean, that's a huge market, so you can't say it's worthless.
I mean, again, Amazon Web Service, these things don't need to be decentralized. Like, no one is censoring your in-gaming purchases. Like, World Warcraft, they had their gold currency. No one is, it's gaming. Like, it doesn't require mining, it doesn't require proof of work, it doesn't require decentralization, and there's no innovation there. There just isn't. It's just a token on a database.
Where you do need decentralization is the game developers right now can just add new assets and just throw them in there and dilute the guys that own the things that are very unique. So the fact that now you'll have NFTs that digitally are unique and they represent something that can't be diluted, now you have something of value. So now you've shifted from the centralized control of the game producers into the hands of the guys that want to innovate.
Unless it's on top of a Bitcoin blockchain, I don't believe that it's unique. Whoever created that ICO, that token can create more tokens. And if he can't, the Ethereum Foundation can create more. I don't believe there's any decentralization outside of proof of work mining. Now, Ethereum, for the time being, still has proof of work mining, which they're trying to eliminate as fast as they can, but they can't, because how do you go to your miners and say, hey, can you guys just stop making money? We want to just print our own with proof of stake.
Okay. No, I agree with that. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, but that's why ultimately
I'm a proof of work fan as well.
It's a philosophical question, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with finance, and also from an investment perspective, it's really about what's the meaning and the ultimate reason for these whole cases, right? That's why I think there's also not a ultimate solution. I'm Swiss, so I'm always somehow in between.
Okay. Tony, you mentioned the book, The Bitcoin Standard by Safidi and Amos, and that is the thesis that Bitcoin is the huge advantage that it cannot be changed, because the inventors are gone, and they had the chance to build their ecosystem for like 2-3 years, totally under the radar, which is impossible for any other altcoin, because they are, the founders, they have to do the marketing. So what do you think about this thesis that Bitcoin cannot be caught anymore because it has this unique advantage?
I'll try and make it really quick.
I'll make it really quick. Okay? I will hear your other opinions, because I know that you like it. But what do you know this book, Bitcoin Standard? Are you familiar?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I think one of the main reasons why Bitcoin is so ahead at first is, you're right, there is a fact that the founders are anonymous, etc., but also the fact that there's built this massive computational power as well, and it has solved a lot of problems through its infancy and through the evolution, right? And the fact that we have this blockchain where we can go back and see the genesis block and the first transaction, etc. So it's a massive, it's this really huge ledger that no one has been able to break until now. I think that's where I see the strength as well. But you're right in pointing out that, as we saw with Ethereum, you can go back and change things because there's been a hack, because something, didn't please the founders, etc. So there is this risk on all the new altcoins that there is a governance risk. But I think the Bitcoin, hopefully, will also continue to improve. And Tone was talking about Schnorr signatures, etc. I think there are improvements to be made to Bitcoin as well, and that will help it evolve in the future.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, as I said, as a tech entrepreneur, I always look back with these modems in 1995, 96. I mean, literally you could follow every individual pixel when you downloaded an image, right? And sometimes it's exactly again the same, right? I mean, we have so many developments, we're so early in this whole development, and if you talk to a guy back then watching the pixel by pixel and telling him, with this technology we will have artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, whatever, I mean, it takes some more time.
Steve?
Yeah, so in 2003, I was the largest West Coast distributor of Blackberries. BlackBerry was on top of the world. They owned the market. Nothing else was even close. And they held that lead for quite some time. And nobody thought that it could actually change. Well, guess where they are now? They're in the toilet. So never count anybody else out. So you have all sorts of innovation. And the fact that they were so successful drove Apple to build the iPhone. It drove Google to build the Android. And so I think competition's good. I think it's healthy.
Okay.
Look, all of that is great, and this is a common misconception in this crypto space that people are comparing Bitcoin to companies. I just sent out a tweet the other day. Bitcoin is not a company, but everything else in the space actually is. To me, every other crypto project on CoinMarketCap, other than Bitcoin, is a company. Ethereum's a company, EOS is a company, Ripple, all of them, Monero, Litecoin, they're all companies. Bitcoin is not. What makes Bitcoin different is not just the fact that the creators were anonymous, was the fact that the first 2 years of Bitcoin's existence are virtually, like, you can't replicate that because it didn't have any value. From day one, Bitcoin was the dumbest thing ever. You were burning electricity to get something that isn't worth anything, right? So from day one, Bitcoin was like, you're doing something out of passion and at a loss. And it pretty much stayed that way. Mining is incredibly challenging. Like so many have gone out of business. And like every other project since Bitcoin was basically a for-profit venture, but not Bitcoin. That's what makes it different. It's not like it's not a car. It's the concept of a car. It's like the engine, and we're still using cars today. The best example of Bitcoin is kind of like oil. In the beginning, like in the mid-1800s, you bought a piece of land, you stuck a shovel in that land, a bunch of black stuff came out, you're like, oh my God, I just got scammed. I bought this land that is totally worthless. In fact, it's costing, like, it's useless. And then all of a sudden, you find a use case for the oil, and now you have the most valuable land in the region. That's what it is. It's the oil, and maybe one day it'll be replaced, but it's going to take another 100 years, maybe even more. It's like the internet itself. It's not a company on top of the internet. It is the internet. But everything else is a company. They're regulatable. They have leaders. They have CEOs. They have founders. They have investors that they have to pay back. That's why when you start your coins, you keep 2,000 of them and you sell the rest. Because you have to pay for people and you have to pay for advertising and all that. Bitcoin doesn't compare to any of them. It's at its own level.
No, and I totally agree. But what if Bitcoin did have a CEO? You wouldn't have had the whole SegWit, that scalability problem. You probably would have solved those things. So, but I agree, it's unique. And I think Bitcoin's here to stay. 80% of my holdings are in Bitcoin, just for the record. I have 20% in everything else. From the Ethereums to the EOS to the other projects that I think have great promise. But Bitcoin is unique. It's digital gold the way I see it.
Let's talk about these issues, the shortcomings of Bitcoin. Scalability, slow confirmation times, high fees.
That was
one solution that has been discussed also yesterday in detail, the Lightning Network. What's your opinion on the Lightning Network? Let's start with Mark.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting approach, but I mean, we had more than enough discussions yesterday. I think that was a good summary.
From an investor's point of view.
Yeah,
would
from
you
an
invest in
investor's
a
point of
Lightning
view.
Network company?
Sorry?
Would you invest in a company that builds the Lightning Network? Let's see the investor's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, from a diversification perspective, perhaps, but ultimately, I mean, we mainly help traditional institutional investors to move into the space. So then we really focus as an asset manager mainly on literally Bitcoin. That's how it is. And everything happening in between is relevant, but for our investors, I mean, honestly, most of them never heard of something like the Lightning Network, right?
Okay.
I think Lightning Network, apart from what it helps in terms of technology and the state channels, etc., I think it's great that it brought a bit more into the light. I mean, we saw Jack from Twitter using it, and they're trying to, with this whole torch thing. I think it's great to see that sometimes you have a point of focus, of attention, and people realize, wow, this is another application, this is great. I mean, of course, we know there are risks, and we know there are dangers of using, pre-hashed transactions, and we know that there is a limit to how much you can send as well. So I think Lightning Network works for small transactions, and so it doesn't replicate all of the benefits of Bitcoin. So I think all these issues can be solved, hopefully will be solved, scalability, etc., technically, and also by this, the basically governance system. But I agree with Tony in saying that it's not a company, and that's why actually you avoid a lot of the company issues that we saw. I mean, the first thing that I remember is when maybe 2014 or 13, when Ripple got some kind of license or officially became Ripple, the first thing that happened, they were fined. They were fined instantly. I mean, a month later, Ripple has been fined, I don't know, $75,000 because it was this transaction with Roger Ver that was not publicly or officially recorded or whatever, So that's, and as we know in the US, every time especially in the US, obviously, as we know, every time you're officially doing business, well, you become money transmitter, you become whatever, you fall under this and that authority, and then you cannot do anything anymore. So the great thing about Bitcoin, it doesn't have this problem. In a similar way, what we saw a little bit with Skype at the beginning. Skype was under the radar. They managed to create this new network where you can actually call people without being called a telecom and without being under the communications, laws. And that really helped them as well. Of course, then they became a big company. But Bitcoin managed to not become a company. And I think that helps it a lot, actually, yeah.
Steve,
I look at it, I like to draw the parallel back to the mobile devices in the early days. The first BlackBerry was text only. You could only send limited. You couldn't have attachments. You didn't have a graphical screen. You didn't even have a phone in there yet. And then over time, the battery life got better, the processors got better, the memory got better, the networks got faster, and all of these things, all these innovations just take time. And I think that's where we are. And Bitcoin's a great foundation. I think it's here for the long term, and it will continue to be the digital gold of the cryptocurrencies. But I do think a lot of these other layers that are going to come on top will also have tremendous value. And the fact that they are owned by companies doesn't bother me.
Okay.
All right, let me try to make this quick. Lightning Network is absolutely necessary if Bitcoin is going to actually scale and give you cheap transactions that are more private, faster, cheaper, more scalable. It's absolutely necessary. Now, your other question was, would a VC invest in Lightning? I think that would be absolutely crazy for a VC to invest in Lightning.
And
it's
a company that builds something.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like, would a VC invest in the internet? Well, what does that mean? How does a VC invest in the internet? Right? So why is Jack Dorsey investing in Lightning? Maybe he has plans. Maybe he's investing in Litecoin, Lightning. God, I hate that. He's investing in Lightning because he has plans for Twitter, he has plans for Square, and they'll be the first to actually utilize Lightning, right? Like, I'm surprised Netflix isn't investing in this because they can all of a sudden pop up a QR code on every television around the world in the scammiest of regions with credit card fraud, and all of a sudden make a lot more money by using a payment that is irreversible, that is immutable. So companies should be investing because Lightning will help their business. That's how they should really be looking at it, in my view on that.
Great, thank you. I would like to open up the discussion to the audience. If you have a question to these gentlemen, please go ahead, move to the mic. Yes.
So, hi.
It's a bit too high for you.
So, with the economic background you all have, what do you think about the Austrian School of Economics and Hayek and the competition of currencies, especially tone?
I mean, honestly, I think the world would be a lot more efficient if everyone was using like the same money. Just like the world would be a lot more efficient if everyone used the same language, or drove on the same side of the road, or had the same electric plugs. I mean, these are efficiencies, right? And I understand why the language thing, everyone wants to preserve their culture, but it doesn't mean it's more efficient. Hayek's view of, like competing private currencies, eventually, there will be winners and there will be losers. And I'm not saying that, I'm going to be the czar and I want to destroy all the old coins so Bitcoin wins. I'm saying that competition will, free market will have Bitcoin win. I mean, I've taken the side not because I'm invested. I'm invested in Bitcoin because I believe the free market will choose Bitcoin because it's the only one that's politically neutral and decentralized.
Well, I think because it's politically neutral and can't be manipulated by governments, until Bitcoin gets a navy, I don't think it's going to take over as a world currency, because I think there's just too much motivation of governments to manipulate their currencies, and so I think that it's a long game, and hopefully some iteration later where we start to have decentralized government. If that vision comes true, then I think that's when you can have a cryptocurrency take over.
Yeah, and ultimately I think it's also, again, a little bit the philosophical question. Are you rather trusting in technology or in governments? And I think, especially in this room, the view will be quite the same, I guess.
I just think that to achieve this kind of adoption that we're talking about and having Bitcoin is basically using it, educating. You know, we come back to the roots of the early days of and what has been discussed here before as well. Using it, educating, and then we go towards adoption and not looking at it only for in a speculative point of view.
More questions? One more? Yes.
Nice to talk to four of you. I have two questions, actually. The first one, what
Short
if?
ones.
What if? What? What?
Go ahead.
Go.
Okay. So, what if next crisis, like we talked yesterday, for example, next crisis, and the government just banned Bitcoin all over the world one day? This is the first thing that I would like to ask you. The second thing, do you see in the future, except Bitcoin, except all other existing blockchains, the future blockchain economy? We could talk a lot about Bitcoin, but blockchain is much larger, is a big opportunity, like internet. We are talking about internet, but internet is not a Bitcoin. This is the economy. So my question is, if you see in the future, and maybe do you see any projects happening that could be the step for the future blockchain economy?
I'll go real quick. The world governments will never agree on anything, right? So that's not going to happen. There's not going to be a global ban on Bitcoin. If there is, let's say, like the drug war, where like 90% of the world decided that drugs were illegal, they still became legal in other parts, and they're going to become legal in more than half the world very, very soon. So even if it's totally illegal, it's not going. Bitcoin isn't going anywhere. Like, people will still mine. In fact, it might make mining more decentralized. Everyone will just mine from home, and instead of not have these big giant farms. Onto the other side, I only see one blockchain, like I see one internet. To me, blockchain is proof of work, and it just makes no sense to spend electricity on an insecure blockchain with no R&D in future of their mining. So to me, there'll be one blockchain, like we have one internet, and I believe it will be Bitcoin.
So I see a lot of enterprise projects, and I think blockchain technology can be implemented in many places. Like Tone pointed out, most times a database is more efficient, but there are definitely places where a blockchain, where you need immutability, can have a lot of value. You have people that can tweak databases and change values inside of databases, and so that's one place where blockchains can shine. But I do agree that in the public blockchains, I think you're probably looking at a couple dozen as opposed to thousands and thousands of them.
It's good that you mentioned the internet, because I think we have a massive problem with the internet today. We have data which is in silos, right? We all know that once you go on Apple, you go on Facebook, you go on Google, etc., our data becomes in their server, they become in their cloud, which is not so much of a cloud, but more of a silo of data. And I hope and I think that through blockchain we will be able to break into that. And what I don't know if you read a book called Life After Google, but there is this term saying emancipate internet from the siloed data. Interestingly, just quickly, I know someone who's has actually made a lot of important innovation in the world of internet back at the time when internet was created. He's 85 today. He's a Frenchman. He's not very known, and he's supporting today more open internet. And I think people who really understand internet should understand that we shouldn't let government, we shouldn't let certain authorities control the internet, and that's a big problem today. And hopefully blockchain could go back and actually emancipate that and solve this internet problem that we have.
Yeah, perhaps very briefly. I mean, technology is agnostic. It's rather left or right or whatever. So I think it's difficult to stop innovation and technological process. So that's question number A. And I also think, as we already just heard, I mean, it's literally impossible on a global scale to stop these developments. So ultimately, I think there will be phases. I mean, the system is fighting back definitely, but I think technology, you can't stop it.
Yeah, good.
And governments are adversarial. Like, if all of a sudden China wants to ban Bitcoin, that means the U.S. probably is like, oh, if they're banning it, maybe we want it. And the other way around, right? Like, well, if they don't want to do it and we don't like them, maybe we should do it. Like that, you're not going to get this kind of cooperation. It's impossible.
I have one last question. It's the most stupid of them all, but I asked them anyway. And the answer is just one number, no talk, just one number. The price of Bitcoin, Christmas 2019, Mark. Your estimated guess.
13,000.
13? 13,000, okay.
39,000.
Oh, okay. Who offers more?
I hate this game, but it's so fun to play. 9,500.
Oh, you're conservative.
Oh, I'm actually going to go a little under that. I know it's a fun game, probably closer to like 7,000.
Ooh, it goes down. Oh, pessimist. Okay. Yeah, Eddie wins. Okay, great. Let's all bet for Eddie.
I like cheap coins. You know, I love when it goes down. So we just buy more.
It's good buying time. It's true. Yeah. Thank you so much. We have a lunch break now. You can ask them for.
And by the way,
lunch,
Tone and I actually do like each other, even though we don't agree.
Thank you so much.